All right, team, welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton. Delighted to have your company with me once again for a discussion today on how to deal with colleague jealousy after your promotion. How do we turn that tension and discontent into trust? Now, it is a common issue. It's a tricky one to deal with when you have multiple people within the same team applying for that vacated leadership role. Usually people think that they are deserving of it, especially long-serving people, but someone inevitably has to miss out. So it does usually create for an air of tension. And if you've not been involved in this directly yourself, I'm sure you've been in the proximity of something similar as it's occurred. It can indeed be very disruptive, and leading through it is a real skill and takes quite a lot of thoughtful consideration as to how you're going to do so. Now, today we've had some relatively good weather actually, so unlike the last two episodes where we've been recording through torrential rain and thunderstorms, I'm pleased to report that there's no such weather occurring outside, so hopefully we'll be able to progress without such distractions today. Now, as we often do, we're going to set the scene using an example from recent history, and today's no different. We're going to go all the way back to the early 1970s and have a look at the shuttle program promotion that sparked a feud within NASA. So let's get into that, and then we'll discuss more in the body of the podcast. Here we go. In the early 1970s, NASA was preparing for its next great leap forward, the Space Shuttle program. The Apollo moon landings had made the agency a household name, but now a new challenge loomed, and that was designing a reusable spacecraft that could carry astronauts and cargo into orbit on a regular basis. Two men stood out as primary candidates to lead the shuttle's design team. Max Fadget was a legend inside NASA, brilliant, direct, and occasionally blunt. He had been the mind behind key designs for Mercury, Gemini, and the Apollo spacecraft. If anyone knew how to build a ship that could survive the unforgiving realities of space, it was him. Then there was George Low. Calm, measured, and deeply respected, Low was a master of strategy and people management. During the Apollo 13 crisis, it was his steady leadership that had kept NASA's mission control focused and the crew alive. He didn't have Fadget's raw engineering genius, but he had a gift for getting teams to work together under pressure. When the announcement came, it was George Low who got the job. To the outside world, it was just another staffing decision, but inside NASA, it was a political earthquake. Fadget felt slighted, convinced that his deep technical expertise should have outweighed Low's leadership style. Some engineers quietly agreed, rallying behind him. Others believed Low was the safer pair of hands and sided with him. The division wasn't loud or public, but it was real. Design meetings grew tense, disagreements lingered longer, trust between the two men never fully returned, and the shadow of that promotion lingered over the shuttle program for many years to come. It was a reminder that in high-stakes leadership, the decision you make about who leads can sometimes be as consequential as the mission itself. And that example, as I said, is an all too common occurrence in the corporate world. Multiple people competing for a vacated leadership position, multiple people, probably with significant seniority, thinking that they are worthy candidates, and inevitably somebody misses out. And then if you are the incumbent to that role, you're left to deal with what can sometimes be quite an awkward fallout. And human nature dictates that we'll be disappointed to lose out in a contest for status and resources. It really engages our monkey brain. It hits us close to home because we want recognition. And when we don't get it, even if it's for justifiable reasons, some of us handle it a little bit better than others, don't we? Some of us find it really tough to hide our disappointment, whereas others can successfully process it internally. and then get behind the new leader. But when people don't, and that resentment festers and is exhibited through disruptive behaviours by the unsuccessful person, it can be very, very disruptive, not only for the new leader, but for the team and the business. So it's really important that we find a way to work through that. As I said, some find it tough not to be openly resentful and even disruptive towards the new leader. And if that's you, and you've been through that before, or you've been in and around that as it's occurring, you'll understand me when I say that it can be a very toxic environment if it's not managed well. You know, there's an anecdote that I'd like to bring up here about a couple of chimpanzees. One was given a slice of cake in captivity by the owner, and the other wasn't. And when the one that wasn't had the opportunity, it savagely attacked the owner or the handler out of pure jealousy that it hadn't received a piece of cake. And the handler was injured beyond recognition, I believe. So when I say the monkey brain, that's what I mean. That's the sort of instinct that we're dealing with deep down in the human psyche. We get incredibly resentful if we miss out on something that we feel like we truly deserved. And it takes that maturity not to act out on that disappointment. We're not so far away removed from our chimpanzee cousins, really, when it comes down to it. But what do you do if you're dealing with a disgruntled chimpanzee in the office, so to speak? What can we do to prepare for this opposition if you are the person who has been installed in the hot seat, so to speak, and you're now facing a couple of disgruntled colleagues? And I've broken this down into 4 separate points of thought that I wanted to go through today. And the first is that we can prepare by expecting it, because it is, as I said, human nature. Let's mentally prepare. And how do we do that? Well, first we expect that it's going to happen, but what I want to do is then anchor ourselves emotionally and mentally to our core values and principles that are going to inform our leadership approach. Where's our North Star? What's our guide in turmoil? And in those tumultuous times where there's a bit of emotion around, it's really, really good to remember where that North Star is, and we need to root it firmly in our core values and principles that will inform the way that we lead. And what that's going to do is it's going to set a really solid foundation for us to move on to the second step, which is to focus on letting our actions as the new leader do the talking in the first instance. Nothing changes perception like action and results. People can talk and say all they want, but if the runs are on the board, so to speak, if the scoreboard says, hey, this person's doing a good job, nothing else really matters. Talk in that instance, in that context, is cheap. Results are what matter. Words, while they can be annoying, while they can be damaging, they're always trumped by action and results. Very difficult to argue with. And point 3 was that if disgruntled individuals don't settle down in time, what do we do then? If our actions are speaking for themselves and the runs are on the board, the scoreboard looks great for us as leaders, but we still have disgruntled individuals seemingly hell-bent on being disruptive, what do we do? And while words are trumped by action, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't employ them tactfully when the time is right in a professional setting. So what we're going to do, if those people haven't calmed down in time, is we're going to have a direct one-to-one conversation with that person in private, and we're going to call out this disruptive behaviour. We don't necessarily need to suggest that it's being driven by jealousy, that they didn't get promoted. We don't need to revisit any of that. We don't need to air our suspicions. What we need to do is stay professionally focused and objective, i.e., we need to address what we're seeing with our own two eyes, the disruptive behaviour, whatever form that's coming in. And hopefully, during that conversation, you both leave with a good idea of what the way forward looks like. Sometimes a heart-to-heart, a face-to-face, where you get to air out grievances. Sometimes that's all that needs to happen. I do think it wins you respect, even if the person doesn't like you still. Usually they at least respect you for having the gumption to get in a room face to face and have a difficult conversation. It's a theme right throughout this podcast. And you know, I was thinking about this in preparation for this episode, and I mentioned to a friend earlier this week that Western society and civilized society in general is an interesting thing, because when you peel back the thin layer of democracy and order, when you've been around the block a few times and seen how things really work, you come to the conclusion that under that layer, thin as it is, the law of the jungle still applies. And sometimes we need to mark our territory. But we have to do so in a professional and intelligent manner. And the way that we do that in the corporate context as a leader is we don't allow bad behaviour and dissent to fester underneath our leadership. We address the threat, so to speak, head on, and we mark our territory in a professional and intelligent manner. And if we get to the end of all that, where, as I said, hopefully it's enough to ensure that the disgruntled employee receives the message and is able to rectify the behaviour. But if we get to the end of that and it hasn't had the desired result, the person's just decided to be toxic and bitter because they're jealous that they missed out and they're not going to get behind you and support you as their new leader, and you've had the one-on-one conversation, well, then we might have to seriously look at disciplinary action if the behaviour warrants that, because we can't allow toxicity to permeate the team like that. You have to remove those people. But if we do so, and this is the theme of this episode, as I said, professional and intelligent in the way that we go about marking our territory and protecting the team culture, if we do decide to go down the disciplinary route, we don't want to do that early on. We want to see if we can coach this person out of their behaviour. That's always preferable, guys. Always. It's far more satisfying. So I don't want you to use it as a first resort. I want it to be well and truly last by some distance. Because if you throw around the threat of disciplinary action too early, it can actually give the impression that you're insecure and that you're overly sensitive. And we don't want to give that impression as leaders. We want to make sure that we come across as balanced and resolute and in control and objective at all times. So make sure that any disciplinary sort of action in a formal sense is only used as a last resort. Get in a room, have the conversation, address the behaviour directly, ask them why they're behaving the way they're behaving. Tell the person that it feels like they're just not pulling in the same direction as you, and you all need to be on the same page if you're to have success as a team. And that includes having everybody with you and behind you. Find out what you have to do to get that person on side. And if you can appeal to people's hearts in that way, if you can try and win people over emotionally, you'll find that it is very, very powerful from a motivation perspective. Winning people's hearts is really key to getting that engagement, that true engagement from people. So appeal to people in a heartfelt way during that one-on-one conversation. And I think you will have far more success than you would if you were to roll out the threat of disciplinary action early on. I don't want to do that. It's a last resort. Now, of course, this requires emotional effort, doesn't it? It's likely to cause us stress. Dealing with this stuff is hard. You know, leading's hard enough, but when you don't have your whole team behind you and you know that there's a bit of dissent and a bit of gossip going on behind your back, it's emotionally taxing. It's going to cause you stress. And that's why it's important that we remember and employ our stress relieving practices to ensure that our mental state is regularly reset. And it's important to ensure it's regularly reset so that stress doesn't have a chance to build up and then negatively affect our leadership performance, because believe me, it will. So we spoke about this in a previous episode, but whatever your stress relieving practices may be, so long as they're healthy, I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and employ those at regular intervals. And by that I mean, daily to a few times a week to ensure that things don't build up. It might be going for a walk after work. It might be spending time with your kids and your partner. It might be engaging in exercise on a regular basis. Whatever works for you, as long as it's healthy, as long as it doesn't involve a bottle of wine every night or a six-pack every night, then let's engage those stress relieving behaviours and get proactive about monitoring our stress through these difficult periods. I think of the brain as sort of like a hard drive. Sometimes you need to clean up the hard drive. You know how your computer gets full of those junk files and the whole system starts to run slowly, and then you clean up the hard drive and all of a sudden it's like a new computer? I think we're kind of similar to that. So we need to clean the hard drive, keep it in a tidy state. And if we can do our stress relieving practices consistently, that'll go a long, long way into ensuring that we can operate in an optimal fashion as leaders. Because we don't want to get to a stage where we're having to bench ourselves because we've been careless, we've redlined for too long. And the stress is now preventing our ability to do our job. And it will, guys. It will catch up with you. You can't really outrun this stuff. You need to deal with it regularly and proactively. Guys, I hope that helps. It's a situation that you likely will find yourself in at some point or another throughout your career. Opportunities come up. You will want to apply, and if successful, you may well find that you have some disgruntled colleagues that feel they could do the job better than you. So there's some tips for helping you navigate that difficult situation if you find yourself in it. And spare a thought for those leaders amongst you that are trying to navigate similar waters. Guys, as I always do, I'll encourage you to subscribe to the show on whatever podcast app you consume the show on. And make sure you subscribe also, or follow, the social media channels. Got a little bit going on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And of course, I'll end the show by pleading, begging, as I always do. Tell a friend, tell 10 friends, tell all your friends about the show if you get value from it, and leave us a nice 5-star review. But until next time, guys, I'll say goodbye.